I am incredibly ashamed to be a Black American because primarily the fact that we cannot hold each other accountable. We always talk about being anti-racist or not being racist or stop being racist to white people. Yet at the same time, we really don't care about racism when it comes to when people from my racial background commits crimes against Asian people. Which is ironic because there are plenty of Black Americans like me who enjoy Japanese anime and manga and video games. I also have some relationships with Asian Americans. And what's really disturbing is that there are so many crimes against people from my racial background to Asians. And the media has willfully refused to report on this. I see hashtags about Stop Asian Hate, all these hashtags on Instagram, on Facebook, and Twitter. All these crimes against Asian Americans. But when you actually do research on the story, you realize that it's coming from my racial background. And worse, the people who are committing these crimes are wearing masks. And you wonder why the crime rate is so high in major cities. And the worst thing is that no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to hold our own people accountable. No one in the Black American community wants to hold our people accountable. And if anyone tries to, they'll be labeled either racist or having internalized racism. We tell people not to be racist, yet people from our racial background are being racist against Asian Americans. Why? Why no one wants to talk about it? Why no one wants to stop this? It's ironic because there are plenty of people who I know have good relations with Asian communities, who do appreciate Asian culture. Yet we as Black Americans are not allowed to hold each other accountable when anyone performs a racist act against anyone, especially against Asians. The mainstream media isn't covering this. The Black American press is not covering this. And anyone that does gets labeled as a Trump supporter. Believe me, I'm more of an independent voter than a left-winger or a right-winger. This is about quality of life. This is about our future. Race relations are getting worse by the week. And I think this is more deliberate by the press. Because the press has become more like propaganda rags than people who are actually into finding the facts of the story. Most journalists these days are more like activists than ones that you usually cover stories like the legendary book The Jungle, the legendary muckraking book The Jungle. We have few muckraking journalists, and we have more activist journalists. We have few journalists that are into muckraking, as in the legendary book The Jungle, and we have more activist journalists. When I mean activist journalists, I don't mean people who are into finding the facts and exposing the truth to the world. I'm talking about politicized, propagandized journalists who don't really care about holding people accountable, regardless of political affiliation or background. It's more like cheerleading at this point. Cheerleading and stenography. I am incredibly ashamed to be a black American. I am incredibly ashamed to be a black American. And the worst thing is that none of it is going to stop these crimes against Asian people. From my background, it's not going to stop because no one wants to stop it. No one actually cares anymore. No one actually cares about quality of life or the crime rate. And you're not allowed to care, even if you are a black American. Even if it's you in public. Because people don't care. And if you try to care, they just put on some label that you're not part of. It's time for crimes against Asians, regardless of racial background. It's time for crimes against Asians, from regard of where racial background the perpetrator is. This needs to stop. These crimes need to stop, especially from our community. Because we don't, basically, our social fabric, destroyed as it is over the past year, will be irreversibly damaged. And America won't have a future. It won't be a united country. It'll be irreversibly divided. I would rather see a future where people live normal lives, having a normal future, basic quality of life. And for some reason, we're not allowed to have basic quality of life anymore. Otherwise, we might as well be living in an authoritarian regime where you're not allowed to speak out without fear of being canceled or being arrested